Hey world, happy Monday. So this is going to be an amazing week. I don't even know why, but it is. And today we have another episode of the KEW Exchange where my good friend Anna Morgan is going to be here. We're going to talk about the emotional side of career options, and we're going to go a little bit into her insight of how she helps people. So thank you, Anna. I
Thank you for
appreciate
having me.
Of course. Um, so let's do this. Let's get started with your career transition. Let's talk about the different transitions you've had, just because it gives a relatable foundation
Okay.
to where you're coming from, and we'll go from there.
My most recent career transition.
We can go back 600 years.
Well, I mean, I can talk a little bit to the fact of how I got into staffing and recruiting and talent acquisition, which I grew up in the hospitality industry, and I then transitioned to selling advertising when I had moved back to Atlanta. And I walked into a local staffing firm and I said, I just want to do anything except sell advertising. And at that point, I was recruited into, and that's where I learned the basics of selling and recruiting kind of in that agency world, and spent, the better part of my career with different staffing firms, ranging from large Fortune 500 staffing firms to smaller boutique firms, and started as a generalist where I worked entry-level positions, kind of a little bit of everything, which was great because then I got to see what really resonated with me and that I really loved. And then I went into accounting and finance for many years. So your accounts payable clerks up to your CFOs and everything in between. And end of 2017, kind of was just feeling a little burnt out on the agency side. And I felt like the crazy catalog lady that everywhere I went, I was in this mindset of, does this person have a job for me? Or is that person a candidate for me? And I really didn't like that about myself. And then an opportunity to take a talent acquisition senior recruiting role evolved. And so I stepped into my corporate experience, and I exceptionally filled lots and lots of seats and worked with amazing leaders, and got a real live experience of what it's like to work in corporate America. And at the height of the pandemic, I found out that I was not performing to the perfect expectations of a less than desirable boss that I had at the time, and really struggled to advocate for myself. And because even though I've worked with thousands of companies and industries, it was my first experience kind of being like, wait, well, I'm doing really well, like filling all these seats and finding great talent and working beautifully with hiring managers. And lesson learned, then I received my severance package May 1st, where I was gifted the gift of entrepreneurship and told it was business needs, COVID, and sometimes performance. And that's totally honest. Like, I can't believe I'm even admitting that here, but I'm telling this story because it's really important, because I resonate with those that have been on similar journeys, whether, you're forced to make a career transition, or you are lifting your head, that your current situation is unhealthy and you're ready to start taking action to look for work. And so I went through all the phases, denial, anger, depression, bargaining, acceptance, through that process. And I'm very keenly aware of that as I work with my clients today.
So let's take a step back and let's go from marketing to staffing.
Mm-hmm.
What was that transition like? I mean, because it's the same. Like, when I think of staffing, it's multiple sales, because you're trying to sell the company that you want to work with, right, to place their talent. But then you're also selling it to candidates that you can place them.
Exactly.
So how is the transition from marketing, right, selling advertising to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at like marketing and personal branding, and whether you're selling people, a pen, a product, whatever, it's all about building relationships and having that in my opinion, that naturally inquisitive mindset to do the discovery, to learn about people, to learn about organizations. And I was always very high energy and, as that person that walked in a room that kind of just, got things going. And so I was great client facing, and I was strong over the phone. So it was like I had built on my years of waitressing and bartending, where you learn how to upsell and multitask and be forward thinking, then taking that into advertising and marketing sales, where you're having to again listen intently to your customer, and then the next building block was stepping into staffing, which is a whole, like, people don't think of agency staffing as a sales gig until they get in the seat and you realize like what an intense sale it is, because you have to build the trust with the company to award you with a job order and then, match the candidates with those opportunities. So it was really about leveraging my strengths, and my strengths were not being afraid to pick up the phone, being highly competitive, having the gift of gab. And so those transitions actually were just built on top of each other as I've gone throughout my career.
So, okay, so when you made that first transition, right, from like, so your people skills and the way that you have insight into others was obviously a huge benefit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, where did you leverage, like, bartending is all about communication and getting to know people and knowing your regulars, because that's your bread and butter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is people that always want to be there with you. So where did that come? Where did that play a role into the agency staff, like that skill set?
No, that's a great question. I mean, I think it was also just, I was always a long-term relationship builder. I was really good at keeping in touch with people. And as social media grew, I continued to share my stories about my career transitions in different places, which, even when I got into staffing, I could leverage my regulars from, my hospitality industry, and think about who they knew, or, a lot of the people sitting on the bar stools were people that were in, areas to hire or to work with a staffing firm. So really just being intuitive in that mindset and trying to connect the dots and leverage the relationships that I had closest to me. And this is a concept that I teach my clients now. People are forced into career transition and they think immediately they have to go outward to look for a job. And when in fact, some of the most powerful connections are literally in your phone or someone that you've touched or communicated with in the past.
So with that intuitive relationship building and your skill set and that being your strength is building and maintaining relationships, where did that play a role as you went from the agency staffing to the corporate staffing or corporate talent, whatever you called it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it was interesting for so long. When you're an agency, you're like, oh, you only go to corporate if like you're a bad recruiter or a non-performer. And I started to realize as I got more mature in my career and had many years of being a top producer and all of that, that I was like, kind of at what cost, right? And I personally didn't like the person I was becoming. And then the opportunity presented itself because of the relationships I build with my clients. So I ended up going to work for one of my best clients. And it was because of that trust and friendship and my BFF vibe that I just emulate that opened up that door essentially. And so I think throughout my career that I've just always kept a very open mind about how these relationships can potentially work. And I don't know if that's just because I'm an extrovert or highly intuitive or just skilled at maintaining relationships, but it was so critical as I transitioned into that corporate world. So, the beauty of LinkedIn is that I had this whole network of my talent, which enabled me to use some of that talent in my corporate role. And then it also boosted additional referrals and credibility. And I now know that transitioning out of agency to corporate is fairly common, or going out on your own to be a individual, solo recruiter or something like that. So, and I just, at that time, I was never interested in management. So I always politely declined that and wanted to stay an individual contributor. But then stepping into that corporate role was a wonderful learning experience. And it's helped me understand what my clients go through so much more. And I'm so glad that I've had that opportunity and still, continue to do in some nature.
So, all right. So let's take it from there to now entrepreneurship, right? Which isn't everything it's glorified to be.
I know, we talked about that.
Yeah, and through that process, you learn so much about yourself, right?
Yes.
Like you learn so much more about yourself than you could have ever imagined from any other career.
Totally.
Doesn't mean that everybody's for it, but
yes.
It's such an educational process.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the transition for you like? When you got the severance package, I guess May 1st, you said? May 1st?
Yes.
So then you transitioned into career BFF, which you've really been living and embodying your whole life, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like your whole career, that's who you are, right? Like
yeah.
you're this bubbly conversationalist that just loves getting to know and building. Like, I mean, that's how we started, right? And you build relationships all day. It's who you are.
Yeah.
So how did that transition go from the corporate to the entrepreneurship in the middle of COVID, right? Because now it's also in the middle of COVID.
Yes.
We're not only talking about entrepreneurship, we're talking about entrepreneurship just getting started in the middle of COVID.
Yeah. And, I want to mention this one piece, and I think it's so hard sometimes we don't, people say things to us and sometimes we're just not ready, right? So for a long time throughout my career, people would always say, like, you should start your own staffing firm. I'd be like, oh, no, thank you. Like, that is not my thing. And then, I got into corporate America and I adored my employer, but I quickly realized, like, oh, I'm not really sure, like, I'm going to be the one that's going to be charging to a CHRO level or a director of talent, and just kind of what I had experienced. And I'm very tenderhearted and empathic to a point. And I also have a very big personality. And for the first part of my year, I spent a lot of time going like meeting to meeting and just observing like how this whole culture worked, right? That was my whole focus. And then I went on a spiritual retreat, and that's where I was able to receive the message of Career BFF, like that I was ready for entrepreneurship. And I still get goosebumps when I say that. I love it. And so when I was, given my dismissal or my, thanks, but no thanks, I wasn't scared because I had these networks in place, and also because of what I had learned on LinkedIn and the engagement and BFFs that I had on the platform. I had more incoming opportunities than I knew what to do with. And this is the base of my coaching program for my one-on-one clients, is that LinkedIn is the best career insurance that's out there, especially in COVID, where we're not able to deliver bagels and donuts and attend chamber events like we used to. But I was out and about all the time, previously. And so I was able just to take fast action and, lean into my natural gifts and start like serving job seekers. And that's where we created the job search hotline, where we were, weekly doing that show to share our expertise, Michael Goldberg and I. And really, just start continuing to expand that network. So it was definitely a transition. I will say the hardest thing for me has been kind of like unwiring from that employee mindset to being the owner of my business and not having metrics to look at. Like, obviously you want to celebrate the people that land. You can look at how many people you do discovery calls with to how many people onboard with you. But my career has been so tied to, what's my gross profit and how many seats have I filled? So there's been that adjustment as well, looking at what does success look like as the owner of Career BFF, and just kind of alchemizing and processing all of that.
Well, look, entrepreneurship is so different, right? Like it's nothing. If you've never been an entrepreneur, it is so different, and it shifts you in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
It also tests you in every way.
Well, I was speaking with another business BFF, and thank God I have been able to surround myself with people like you and other friends where we can bounce things off of each other, where it kind of feels like you have a coworker. But I said, if you're going into entrepreneurship and you have some unresolved gunk going on in your system, it's going to come up as you go through this process. And whether you may be really strong with sales, but you may be less efficient with accounting or back office things. And so that stuff pops up. And then, trying to find that balance is also extremely hard. So I think the question came up for anyone that's looking to go into entrepreneurship. Stop Google searching first and foremost. My advice would be to lean into LinkedIn and your network first and foremost. You don't have to have a glammy website. Don't worry about that. Start building the relationships and, your accomplishments and finding ways that you can monetize the things that you love doing and that you're really good at.
So let's look at the test of entrepreneurship. What has been your biggest challenge? Like your absolute biggest challenge? I mean, you came from you came from the agency staffing. You were always working with people around you. Mm-hmm. Is it solopreneurship? Is it the feeling alone at times in entrepreneurship that gets you? Because that gets me at times.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely it, because, I loved sitting in the cube with 6 other people, and we'd have music going and we'd be talking, I'd hang up the phone from a phone screen and we'd have a fun little exchange about that. Or we could talk about hiring managers or whatever it might have been, or simple things like sharing recipes, talking about what's going on at home. Like that, for me, the human to human connection is the thing that I've struggled with the most, because there's only so much you can talk to your spouse or your dog or your daughter about.
Yeah.
At some point,
yourself.
Yeah. They want to know if you're making money and closing business and, in the black and not in the red. So
as this has been developing for you, and as you've been evolving everything you do, you started off in one place, and I know this, right? Because we've talked about it.
Yeah.
You started off in one place and now you're heading a different direction. What is that direction that you're heading right now?
Again, the beauty of your network, right? And just putting yourself out there and not being afraid. And, I think it matters for job seekers too, to not be afraid to engage in the comments and to tell us a story. We hire humans. And this is a lot of what I teach, that don't be afraid to tell a little story in your LinkedIn profile and let us know what you do outside of work. Because in a sea of candidates that have similar experience, recruiters' brains attach to unique stories. So, but going back from direction, but, in May, I was coaching one-on-one. I was doing LinkedIn profiles, but I definitely am kind of going full steam into this kind of social job search concept, which is teaching a lot of LinkedIn specifically for job seekers. And it's not so much personal branding, but there's an element of it. It's social selling and looking for work. And then I'm really pulling out my 20 years of recruiting experience to build a 4-week group program that's super affordable, that really educates the importance of understanding the different type of recruiters. Because I get it. People just want a job, right? And they don't really care who the recruiter is or what type of recruiter there is. But I'm trying to bust that myth, because I have seen over all the thousands of candidates that I've personally interviewed that there is an opportunity to show up in a more powerful way to build that relationship so they never forget about you. And that's kind of the secret sauce. And it doesn't matter if they're crappy recruiters. I have the insight to help you get around that with just my years of experience, and then building it out so it makes sense, right? Recruiters have a bad rep, but it's also because corporations' talent departments are broken, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, that could be a mini series.
Yes.
So when you look at this and you're dealing with somebody one-on-one, and like, I mean, it's so important to bring yourself to the table, right? Because that's your differentiator, that's your uniqueness, that's what makes you stand out. How do you try and get people comfortable to share themselves, right? Because not even 10 years ago, people were scared to say, "Oh, I do this as a hobby," or "I do that," or "I do this on the side," or now it's one of those things where you have to share those details because the market is so competitive that you have to show why you're different than somebody else.
Yeah, I think, I see this most, and I tend to attract like late Xer, early boomer clients that really were raised in that generation that you have to be like super buttoned up and don't share anything personal about yourself. So, my goal is to kind of break that wide open, right? Because I think it's horse poo, in my opinion, because again, it's human to human. But how I do that is really just through really thoughtful questioning. And because I've been a recruiter for so long, those questions, one, come up intuitively, like through me, which is a blessing. And then, that's where people say, like, Anna was able to bring out things in me that I didn't know was possible. And that's just through questioning, and also giving them a safe space that they feel comfortable sharing. And throughout my career and my networking, I've always been one of those people that people open up to a lot. I think you can relate to that. And so that's an extreme privilege of mine. And I take it very, very seriously. And looking for a job and accepting a job is a life decision. It is just as big as where you're going to go to college, where your first house you buy, who you're going to marry, having children, getting divorced, losing a spouse. I mean, this is a life decision. And so even though I've always been ADD, like, I've been so vigilant about helping people dot the I's and cross the T's and really make sure that it aligns with what they need, whether that's more remote work or leaving early to get their family, and any of those things. So in my coaching, it starts with just setting expectations, a lot of like clarity work, as well as short-term and long-term goals. And even though I do job search strategy coaching, it touches some of the life coaching as well, because it's like, and that's why I talk a lot about self-care and mental health. And, I sprinkle in my knowledge of being sober for 12 years and some of the concepts I've learned over that time about, taking care of yourself and, these different things that matter as how you show up as a potential candidate. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yes. I'm trying to remember the question. It's one of those things, right? Like, I'm looking at this, and you just embody career BFF so much. Like, it is the embodiment of you as a company. When you're sitting down with somebody or having that conversation, nobody sits down with anybody anymore. When you're on Zoom,
when we're zooming.
Yeah, zooming all day. When you're zooming, how do you bridge that gap for them? How do you, especially like a boomer, right? Like, how do you get them to understand that the world is so different now that you need to be more open about who and what you are, right? Because that's like a culture shock. Like, that is
it really is, and it's so uncomfortable for some people. And there are people that come through that are just like, I hate social media. I'm never going to do it. Don't even talk to me about it. And I say, then it's like, okay, well, I'll be wishing you luck, and I'll be here if you change your mind. Right. And, I'm not a slick, close them on the thing if they're not right for me. I want to enjoy the work just as much as I want to provide the transformation for them. So it's really, I think, getting a good understanding of their history, right? Because we all bring in different experiences or baggage sometimes to opportunities. We've all taken a job where we're like, why the heck did I do that? And here's what I learned from it. So I help kind of pull out some of those key things. So one, we make sure we don't repeat it. And two, we try to model success after a favorite position or a peak career moment. And then a lot of times I leverage my story, my experience of my own transition and how powerful that was to have job offers in my DMs and not even having had applied to a position, right? And that's the power of building trust in your network and leaning into those relationships. So I believe that builds that trust and authority with them. And depending on, again, sometimes it's intuition. I know there are some people that I have to take through the program much slower than others. Some are ready to go and take fast action and are super willing to implement the things I teach. And others need a week in between to like integrate and process. And that's the beauty of one-on-one. As long as you set those expectations up front, then I can, juggle my day according to their needs. And through my questioning, I also get a feel for, will they be someone that can execute the things that I teach, or will it make sense? Because so many people use LinkedIn as a place card holder for updating their jobs. And I was guilty of it for 10 plus years until I worked with Judy Fox. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing everything wrong on LinkedIn. I'm posting boring pictures with like a sort of, inspirational post. And I'm just resharing jobs that I was posting for. And I wanted everything that LinkedIn had to give me, but I didn't know that a part of it was giving back. And it resonated so deeply within me because of just who I am about supporting and giving back to others. Then once I got the hang of it, I was like, this is awesome. I was telling somebody, I was like, I can't imagine my life without LinkedIn. Like, I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met Lena. I wouldn't have met G. I mean, all these people that I text like daily on my phone. And that's has been an amazing gift since COVID because we've all been stuck at home.
Yeah, right. I mean, we're all in the same position basically, unless you're a healthcare worker. So I want to take this example, right? Because the world's changing and it's changing fast.
Super.
COVID is going to lead to a lot of divorces. So that's a guarantee.
That's another big life event.
That's another big life event. But you're going to have a lot of single parents that have been out of the workforce for a while.
Yeah.
And let's say single mother, now 2, has mostly custody of kids, whatever, however you want to describe that situation. But she's been out of work for 10 years. Mm-hmm. She has a degree and she had a 6-year career before that. Mm-hmm. How do you, when I look at it, right? I'm different than a normal human being. And I know that already. When I've hired people, I look at intangibles. I don't even look at resumes. I speak to the person and I know what I'm looking for. But when I look at this, how can they help boost their resume, right? Because how can they quantify 10 years of being a mother or a wife into applicable skills? Because there's time management, there's multitasking, there's so
finances,
budgeting.
Literally the first line of the about section for a mom re-entering the workforce, that would get my attention was be like, I kept my kids alive for the last 10 years, because it would get the person's attention. I personally believe your LinkedIn profile is more powerful than a resume. And here's why. If you are active on the platform and you can take any life experience and tie it into a leadership topic. So I would sit with the mother returning to the workforce and get to know her really well. And then I can take bits and pieces of her story and together we can start crafting content. I mean, I've posted about being married for 20 years, about teaching my first yoga class, just Kodak moments with my daughter and turn those into leadership leadership conversations, because the matter of fact is that we are home. And, I pray and hope that employers, will wake up to this concept that, we're no longer checking boxes, because you get what you hire, and it's better that you know more about that person, that you can get in the head of your hiring managers and make sure it aligns with your mission, your vision, and your values. And so I believe, and just the number of HR people I'm surrounded with, that there is a big movement in HR, especially around diversity, inclusion, and equity, and, really breaking down these barriers of these old horse poo ways that we have done recruiting. And, think about it. What will getting hired look like when our kids are out of college? I mean, will resumes even matter in 10, 15 years? Will it be your social media portfolio and imprint? Who knows? So there's lots to think about there.
We'll all be playing video games and robots will do all the work.
No.
AI. No, I mean, no, right?
I hope not. I mean,
everything changes so fast.
Yeah.
I watched that Disney movie WALL-E, right? With the one with the little robot guy, and
I haven't seen it in a while. I need to watch the new one. My daughter said it was phenomenal.
No, I don't know.
It's like a jazz one. All right, somebody from the comments pipe in. I can't remember. So it's the new Disney Pixar Soul.
Uh-oh.
I think it's Soul.
Oh, Soul. Yeah, Soul.
Yeah, you put that on Disney
Soul.
Plus.
Yeah. I should probably watch that one. No, but I'm thinking about WALL-E, right? And how they positioned humanity was everybody sitting in chairs all day, just going around on conveyor belts and living their life that way.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe humanity is a bunch of sheep that are going to end up there. So it wouldn't shock me.
Did you ever watch the Lego movie?
Oh.
Everything is awesome, and he goes into his little work every day. Anyway, I like that song.
So we can go off on tangent.
Yeah, sorry.
So no, that was on me. I was just thinking about the whole future of work thing, and
yeah.
But I'm looking at this, right, and I look when I was hiring people, whether it was for my company, whether it was for other things I did. I ran a hotel for a couple months. I looked at those intangibles, because the intangibles mean so much more than anything that's on paper.
Totally.
I mean, I didn't even take resumes half of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to sit there and speak to the person, right?
Exactly.
And see who they were, see what their intricacies were, see if they had special differences that they needed accommodations for, whether it's single parent, right? Or anything else in their life that would give them they would need additional flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think the world's there yet. I don't think hiring managers.
No, I mean, it's going to be a slower process, but I think, the fact that so many corporations have been able to grow and be successful and maintain with having a workforce be, majorly remote, that it's a big wake-up call. And I think it's going to have a weird kind of ripple effect. You have, organizations like Salesforce that are saying they're totally remote indefinitely. Spotify just did it, recently. And Google was one of the first companies to say they were taking their people remote at the height of the pandemic. And then everybody kind of followed suit. So I think as we have more organizations that are willing to just take a chance on humanity, that hopefully we can continue to break down some of these barriers around hiring. But in the meantime, the job seekers have to, still play the game as it's set right now, but really start leaning into that networking piece. And it is hard. It's hard for introverts. It's hard. You think about making a post and you're like, oh my God, I think it has to be so perfect. And my experience over the last, 12, 15 months on the platform, it's that's fear, right? We say it's false evidence appearing real. Just go for it. If not now, when? And what do you have to lose, right? I mean, so maybe somebody trolls you or says something unfavorable. There's a delete button, and, a little bit of resiliency needed to get you through that. But, employers are also looking for innovators, people that are okay doing grassroots types of marketing campaigns to stand out, right? And it's not just about commenting or putting up, content. It's being a visionary and really allowing the way your unique brain works, like tell a story of how you can impact that organization. And, as we have more, like millennials that are moving into leadership positions, and Xers too, or kind of like the forgotten generation, we're going to keep bringing up, Gen Zs and younger that are going to challenge the status quo. I mean, this year has shown us that, we're not going to sit idly by and let baloney happen in the world these days, as much as possible.
So
my soapbox. Sorry.
Soapbox. No, it's your episode. You can get on your soapbox. I
Thank
fully
you.
appreciate it and allow it and love it.
Yeah.
I look at like old industries, right? And when I say that, I mean very structured, very rigid pharmaceuticals, financial, banking, like those industries I don't see them changing much at all yet. Like I see them very slowly, beyond slow, almost like molasses slow.
Right.
Kind of moving that direction.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I really wanted to go into, right, is industry transitions.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe over the next 20, let's say 15 to 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
Many industries that are prominent today
Mm-hmm.
are going to be completely gone or less different, or much, 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 much different.
Right.
So when you take a candidate that was in a position that, let's say, senior level exec, and they were really big in a specific industry, and the industry is kind of disappearing, call it retail. I don't know why I would mention
Well,
that.
you can say hospitality because, hotels, restaurant chains,
Right.
Those types of things have just been decimated, right?
So how do they look towards, because going into the same industry doesn't make sense anymore, right? Because now the pool is
or it just is not available. Mm-hmm.
Right. So how do they look towards a different industry? How do they look at those skills and say, I can go to any industry I want and apply these skills elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes back to thoughtful questioning, like, and making sure that there's clarity around your core values and your strengths, right? And I apply a lot of the same concepts that I used to use in agency recruiting, where I would be like, how am I going to go about getting new clients, right? So say I've worked, like, for example, I was a hospitality person, right? So when I started in staffing, I'm like, I'm going to kind of go with what I know. So I'm going to target food distribution and liquor and wine distributors because I know that stuff. So I knew that I could speak confidently about that. So what I recommend is if someone's looking to switch industries or their industry is kind of slowly dying, is to look at like the vendor companies and industries that they worked with, and then start leaning into some of those relationships, because again, that's closest to what you have done. If they've done business with that industry, their brains are going to process the transferable skills so much better than if you're trying to go to hospitality to finance, right? Like where you could draw similarities between like budgeting and forecasting and doing the books and stuff like that, but it depends on your role. So I always look at those vendor companies because a lot of times people have connections there already, and then they can take those connections and ask, who do you know from that, space, and it just expands from there. The other thing I recommend job seekers do is like, look at industries that light them up. One of my clients is a dog lover. So she was like, I would love to work with, dog products, e-commerce companies. And, she's coming out of like logistics for a long time. And I'm like, great. You understand how products get from point A to point B. Now we just have to build stories around, how those skills would be applicable in these types of positions. So I think it's always easier for people to like look at stuff that they're personally interested in, because then there's an air of confidence that comes with when they're telling their story to make those connections and the transferable skills. I'm trying to think what else. And And then obviously networking and coffee chats and informational interviews. A lot of people are afraid to ask people on LinkedIn for an informational interview. And the reason they're afraid is because they're not giving to that person or that contact first. So there's not an even exchange of energy. So I always recommend, if I'm targeting you, Michael, that I, want to have an informational interview with you, I'm going to make sure I show up to your lives. I'm going to make sure I personalize a message that I can take something from your profile. And then I'm going to say, I'm interested in pivoting from hospitality to, say mortgage. And you've been in mortgage for 7 years, and I would love to get your expertise. And also looking for people that have had similar transitions as well, and say, how did you do it? And get that information. But people on LinkedIn generally want to help, and you're gifting them the opportunity of being a mentor versus really having that fear that you're inconveniencing them. If they receive it as inconveniencing, then they're probably not the right person to reach out to anyway. And you just have to kind of, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's huge, right? Because, we've had this talk in private many times. I think industries are going to start disappearing. Things are going to shift so drastically, and people are going to be really lost, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not going to understand how to take that skill set to any other industry, no matter what it is. Mm-hmm. So the old way was you stayed in an industry, you stayed in a job, you stayed there as long as you could. And if you got lucky, you retired before you died of a heart attack at the desk. And it's not the world.
Like my grandfather at Life of Georgia, he got out of the military, worked his way up at Life of Georgia, and then, retired, and that was it. But now it's almost weird if you've been at a company for 15 years or more. They're like, oh, you're just comfortable. And it's like, no, that's not the story either. Right. But as things change, this is, building your relationships and like your personal database. And, I love LinkedIn, but we never know if LinkedIn's going to be here forever either. So making sure from a safety net standpoint that you're keeping your contacts like in your own CRM or in your own Excel spreadsheet. So heaven forbid, if something happens, you still have a way to get a hold of people and keep building that momentum and those relationships.
That's interesting. Well, you are the relationship builder, right? Like you are your strength is relationships, right? And you build.
I try. I wish there were like more hours in the day, because there's just so many amazing humans to connect with and learn from and support as I've gone through this journey so far.
Stop sleeping for a couple of weeks. You'll be fine.
Try that. Well, that's not a happy Anna Morgan.
It won't affect you at all. I want you to talk about the group thing that you're going to start doing, because I think could be very helpful to people. Mm-hmm. Watch it today, replay tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's playing on, Career BFF was founded, around the idea of a dog's best friend, a career's best friend, because I'm the crazy dog lady. I have 4 dogs. I've been rescuing dogs and hiding dogs in my basement since I had a car. Okay. So, and then that whole, I don't rescue people essentially, but here's the thing. Like when people come into my container, like I oftentimes think about the experience, like my kill shelter rescues go through when they come into my home, right? They are timid. They won't make eye contact. They growl, they bite, they're abandoned, they're frustrated, they're angry, right? And then you start to see that evolution, that they start to trust you and they start to, sit next to you or allow you to pet them. And it's like this sounds silly, but the same transformation happens as I like work with my clients. Because a lot of times they come into the Career BFF container being like, I'm done with job searching. Like I just want to turn this over. And we know the same concept. Sometimes it's easier for people just to tell us what to do. And if they and they start to build trust, just like my animals do. And then you see their personalities come out. I start pulling out awesome information about them to help them tell their story more effectively. And then before you know it, everybody's, running free and wagging and just having a great time. So the land interviews for real is going to be a 4-week group container. It's going to start with optimizing your profile, because that's the thing I feel super passionate about, and my dogs are barking in the background. And then we're going to go into like the different types of recruiters, because how you engage a corporate recruiter and how you get engage an agency recruiter, there are some major differences. And so I'm going to be teaching how to essentially like manage up to both of them to get the biggest bang for your buck in the shortest amount of time. And so it's going to be with templates like interview guide, which is going to be amazing. And then, kind of a process on how to keep following up. And I'll tell you, like, even on the agency side and the corporate side, there were times where some pleasantly persistent candidates would drop into my DMs or my emails, and I would be like, oh my God, like it's Mike again. But I kid you not, then I gave that person the time, because it was like they were resilient. They weren't taking no for an answer. Yeah. And so some people are like, I don't want to be too over the top. But what they don't understand, and this goes back to why I want people to understand like a day in the life of a recruiter, is because they may not know that the recruiter's working 40 other positions. And so you have to stay top of mind, and you must tell stories that resonate from a psychology side and a heart side, because most people that are in recruiting do it because they like helping people. That's how we get into it. But sometimes, going back to kind of broken HR departments, there are so many demands that I'm going to give them a methodology to follow to make sure they're pleasantly persistent and different ways they can leverage those communication styles that doesn't seem overly stalkish. And also kind of flipping the script, recruiters are like professional FBI agents. If we want to find stuff out about you, like we will. So it's really the educational piece, and then how to take that fast action to move the needle to conversion, interview, and actually get to the decision maker. So that's another thing that I think job seekers miss, is that they kind of dismiss those first line recruiters, but they have all the power. It's not necessarily the ATS systems that are automatically neglecting people, because over my years of recruiting, most companies, Big Murph agrees with me, most companies they don't spend the money to program the back sophistication as much. They buy those systems for performance management, talent management, and payroll. And ATS, the applicant tracking solution, is a lot of times an afterthought. Now, that might be different with some, I wonder if my exterminator is here. What was I saying? The ATS system in some organizations could be slick enough to screen you out with keywords and stuff like that. But I believe if people focus on the human to human connection with those first line recruiters, they will push your resume forward in the ATS. And so that's a lot of what's going to be covered in that program, as well as 1 week on like starting the social job search concept. So it's going to be, I think it's amazing. Some people may think that they can find all this on the internet. But with 20 years of recruiting corporate and agency, like they're getting to kind of plug into the person that has hit the auto rejection or schedule an email with me. And I've worked with enough recruiters to gather the data that this stuff is legit, and it will help them move the needle with their opportunities. So.
Well, to me, like I have friends that have been job seeking at times, and I haven't looked in a long time just because it's nearly impossible in my situation. But it's a torturous process. Like looking for a job right now, or a career, or whatever you want to call it, right? Mm-hmm. It's torturous, right? Mm-hmm. It's the first interview, second interview, third interview. You don't even know who the decision maker is. You don't even know you keep getting called back, and then they tell you that they're not taking that they don't want the role right now because there's no communication on that side. So you have people not communicating. It really rips you apart emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, and like tears
Yes.
you out, right? It makes you extremely insecure and very like almost feel worthless after a while, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
you get
But that's why
crushed.
I think this program is so valuable, is because I'm going to give them all the right questions to ask so they don't get to that point and they know exactly what to expect. And because sometimes there's so many moving parts in recruiting, a lot of times we're waiting on information from hiring managers, right? We're having to chase down feedback. But good recruiters are going to understand the process from beginning to end. And then, so say you deal with mostly not great recruiters, you are going to have the right questions to ask so nothing slips through the cracks and you're not blindsided, right? There's nothing worse than getting to a third and fourth round interview. This happened with someone I know recently, and she's all excited about going to the interview. And I was like, okay, have you guys talked about money? And she was like, no. And I was like, okay. Like, my opinion is talk about money early and often because we don't want to waste each other's time. And if you're $25,000 off the mark of what I've been budgeted, then let's get to know each other and I can keep you in mind for something else. But let's maximize the time together to make sure, we're a good fit. So these questions matter so you don't get to that point of desperation, showing up in a place of desperation, of lacking confidence, of lacking self-worth, because that's a lie. There's a spot for everyone, and it's just a matter of making those connections, heart to heart, human to human, to find the right opportunity. And sometimes you do have to put yourself out there, but that's the world that we're in right now. And it's harder for others, but like I said, I can mirror my coaching along for those that need to go a little bit slower in order to go faster down the line. So, but it is hard. And like, I applied to a position recently just to like stay in tap with like what job seekers are going through. And it's a lot to like put all the dates and all that stuff. And so there are things that people can do to streamline those processes and have that stuff ready to go so they can just cut and paste into some of those applications, because it is very time consuming. I was really surprised. But I do that to make sure I stay in tap with the candidate experience. So
I also feel like part of it is fear driven, right? Like as a candidate, if you're like sitting there and you're at your bottom dollar in savings and you have bills coming, you're willing to get dragged around before asking questions that could rule the job out in the very beginning, but you're going to waste all this time of yours and theirs because the other side seems to offer information that's relevant right up front. And I feel like there's a transparency issue that's also crushing this whole process.
Well, I think it's also because like when you're in that situation, your unemployment's running out, and people are like, I'll take anything. And it's like, it's better to take a step back and have like, 3 to 5 types of positions that you really want to focus on, or 5 to 10 core companies, and just put the full court press on them instead of just like, spraying your resume everywhere and hoping that, something is going to come in. Because in my opinion, that's a little bit of that insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And if you can stand in your worth, and, obviously I honor and respect the financial insecurity that comes with job seekers that are facing that, it's, being able to communicate their worth and their expertise aligned with those types of positions will, be a better outcome for them, as opposed to, taking something that, in their gut, they know is probably not best. But sometimes it's about timing, and maybe you have to take a hospitality gig or drive Uber or do some freelance work in between to augment your income and keep things afloat, or like to do freelancing type of work to kind of keep relevant experience on your resume so you have something to talk about. And there's a lot of like, e-learning opportunities on the web and on LinkedIn that people can do to kind of elevate their skills and have more things to talk about if they've been unemployed for a period of time. So
I mean, obviously COVID's impacting all of that, right? I mean, there's so many, there's just been, COVID's kind of wiped out the time frame thing. It's wiped out the timeline to rehire people. It's wiped out the timeline. Like almost everything's been completely deconstructed.
right.
When it comes to core values and your foundational values, when you're an applicant, I mean, how upfront do you need to be about those? Like for me, I'm always upfront about them, but that's just me, right? Like I don't know if everybody's willing to do that. But like when you're a hiring person or a talent person, like, and they're applying for a job, should their values be somewhere on there so that they understand
On the resume or on the LinkedIn profile?
I'm thinking on a resume even. Like, why?
I mean, I don't typically see things like that. I see language that you can incorporate in your resume or in your relevant experience or extracurricular activities that might emulate your values, right? Like if you're passionate about, servant leadership, your volunteer work with the Habitat for Humanity or homeless shelters or food banks. And, if you're vetting an organization that is involved in some of those things, that's where that connection comes into play. So I do encourage some of that on the resume. And then you can also incorporate some of it in your like summary of experience, kind of telling that story, how you got from one point to another and the things that you can bring and the impact that you can make with the organization as opposed to what you're looking for, the objective, the old school objective statement on the resume. So, the resume is a sales document, right? It is a comprehensive story. We had this conversation that some coaches don't recommend including your resume on your LinkedIn profile. And that made me pause to think, like, as a recruiter, is that a good idea or is that a bad idea? But after we talked about it, it actually made more sense because your resume is personal, it's yours. And it's almost like a privilege for people to get a chance to view it. So, having a little more exclusivity around it has a little bit more power than letting someone just make a decision about you without connecting, without having a conversation, if you have it on your profile. So, most applicant or most processes make you go to the website and upload your resume anyway. But I thought that was great advice and something that I've definitely, it's not something I always recommended that they put it out there. I, usually say test it out and see, if your conversion is better or if you're not getting the kind of traction, then, try something different.
Awesome. I love this. And see, the hour went by really fast, didn't it?
It really did. Thank you.
It did. And you flooded the world with information.
Thank you. Thank you.
So any last minute things that you want to mention?
Because I collectively have just felt that a lot of people are struggling right now, just make sure that you're tuning in and going inward if you need to and reaching out for help if you're feeling alone or struggling, because we are here. Everyone is here to support each other. And these are tough times for a lot of people, and mostly for the employed people that may watch this, that respond to the DMs. Like, make 15 minutes to help someone be seen and heard, because you never know, that could be, a life-saving conversation for someone. And it's our responsibility to lift others up. And so, yes, that is, just focus on your self-care and, take care of yourself and just keep putting one foot in front of the other. So awesome. Thank you so much for this time, Michael. It was awesome.
Thank you, and I appreciate you. And and we had a great conversation. And
Yeah. Thank you for being my career BFF. A career BFF is someone who, is a connector, someone who lifts other people up, is someone who takes radical responsibility for their career and the career of others. And you are definitely a career BFF. So thank you.
you're welcome. And thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah. All right. Have a wonderful weekend or rest of your week. It's not the weekend. It's only Monday.